Can't save them on my own. I can't put out these fires burning out of control without your love.
So there's so much in these. Like if we read the whole long one too, there's just so much to talk about. And so it's really, got to kind of focus on a couple things. One, I want to focus in on what we've been talking about in pretty much every single Bible study that we've had so far, and that is the idea of God choosing the weak things of the world to shame the strong. And, those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. And, Jesus is really just the fulfillment of that whole teaching. Like he's the perfect example of that, right? If you really think about it, here's God. The first lines we look at when it says, actually in the second reading, where Jesus, though he was in the form of God, did not consider himself equal to God. Right? Though he was in the form of God, did not regard equality with God. So Jesus as a human being was not a person who walked around and said, yeah, I'm God. So I'm here and you're here. Right? Through his example, he just kept pouring himself out, humbling himself more and more every day. Now, this is not a Christian saying, but Victoria would know this. The karate school that we used to go to, where my son still goes, they would have a saying, and it was because the teacher who came to this country, who started this school, had a teacher, and that teacher gave him two things when he came here. And as strange as it sounds, he gave him a candle and a bar of soap. Now that sounds really weird, maybe because he has dirty and he's got to use the candle to see where he's dirty and clean himself. No, that's not what it was about. The reason was because those two things, a candle and a bar of soap, are two things that keep giving of themselves until there's nothing left. You think about it. You can use a bar of soap until it's just gone. A candle will just burn down until it's gone. And so that was the imagery of Jesus. And I always thought it was funny that they would use that, because I always brought it back to Jesus. I'm like, wow, these people, they're doing karate. They got this Eastern philosophy, but they're so talking about Jesus, right? Because he's a person who just kept giving and giving and giving. And one of the reasons why I wanted to read the longer version, but I know it would take forever, was because it goes through the whole Last Supper as well, right? And if you think about it, let's think about Jesus. So think about Jesus, second person of the Holy Trinity. This is God, right? In the Gospel of John, it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. In other words, Jesus always was. The Son of God always was. He is equal to God the Father, equal to the Holy Spirit, right? Even though as a human being, he didn't see himself that way. He didn't act like that, right? But so Jesus is equal to God. He's the God of the universe, looks down at us, who he created, loves us so much, wants us to be, we're like crowning of his creation. And, you think about it, like everything that God created, so magnificent, so amazing, like for instance, the stars, the galaxies, whatever. I mean, it blows my mind, just to think about the fact that there are more stars in the sky than there are grains of sand in all of the oceans, all of the seashores, in all of the world. I mean, wrap your mind around that. That's a lot. And the Bible says that God has a name for every star. I mean, so if God is that personal with a star, or something that's not, breathing, something that's not alive, something that's not conscious, something that's not made in his image, he looks at us and we're the crowning of his creation. So, but we're not God. But because God loves us so much, what does he do, right? We know the story. He humbles himself and becomes a man. He becomes one of us. I used to know a priest who would say it like this. Let's suppose you weren't getting this whole concept of God becoming a man. And he would kind of explain like this. He said, let's suppose you had an ant farm. That sounds odd, but let's suppose you had an ant farm. Those little the glass things, you got little ants, right? And then in this ant farm, you take care of it, you cultivate it, you create it for them, and you're just watching them, you're painting, and you love these ants. As silly as it sounds, you love these little bugs, these little ants, right? And then all of a sudden, everything is good, but then the ants, they start doing some weird stuff. Like they're trying to get through the cracks of the glass. They're trying to break out. Then they start like abusing each other and beating each other and eating each other. And all of a sudden it's just kind of going wrong. This wasn't what you had in mind. You just wanted this nice little ant farm. It's kind of cool to look at. They're beautiful creatures, right? And so you think like, what do I do? I got to fix this situation. So, you maybe create some more ants, and you these little prophet ants, right? So you send in your little prophet ants to go and tell these other ants, stop eating each other, right? Stop beating on each other. Stop messing things up. You don't understand. This is perfect. It was perfect when I started. This is the way it should be. So what do they do to your little prophet ants? Well, they eat them, and they maltreat them, and they get rid of them, and so on. And they're not listening. And it's just not going right. It's just really not going well. But before that, I forgot, before the prophet ants, you did something drastic. You saved a couple of them, and you took the hose, and you just washed all the rest. But you saved a couple of them. Let's just say 6 of them, right? Or maybe 8 of them, right? The mom and the dad and the 3 sons and the 3 daughters, right? So you started over. And then you sent the prophet ants, because that didn't work either. Nothing's working. These ants aren't listening, right? They're not listening. They're not getting it. They're messing up what you created. They're messing up this perfection. So what do? You really love these ants. So you do the only thing you think you can do. You become an ant. And you go in and you try to understand them. Try to get them to understand you. Talk to them that way. So you humble yourself. And it's a kind of a weird example, but if you think about it, Jesus Christ came down to earth so that we could get to know him. Right. Get to know him better and really kind of try to understand his plan. Right? And give us an opportunity to be with him forever because he loves us so much. Now, yeah, he humbled himself to do that. Right? The God of the universe humbles himself. I always like to tell kids, has anybody ever seen the movie Aladdin? Yeah. What is the big line in that movie with the genie, right? Great big cosmic power! Yeah. Itty bitty living space. And you think about it, right? God in human form. Right? So you have God who humbles himself like that, but what do we do? Right? What do human beings do? We crucify him. But what does he do? Does he say, no, I'm done with you? No, look what you're doing to me. I can't believe you're going to beat me like this. I can't believe you're going to scourge me, crown me with thorns, spit on me. Look what I did for you. I became one of you. No, what does he do? He loves us even more. He humbles himself even more and loves us even more, even to the point of death on the cross, where he's on the cross and what does he say? Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. See, he understands we're messed up. He understands that we're not going to understand. Right? And he humbles himself even more. And the reason why I wish we did the longer version is because most faiths now stop there. Yeah. Right? Most Christian denominations now stop there. Jesus humbled himself, became a man. Jesus humbled himself, died on the cross. But we as Catholics know that Jesus went even farther to humble himself. I mean, think about this now. And if this doesn't blow your mind, I don't know what will. Not only did Jesus humble himself to become a man and die on the cross and become what we are, but if you think about it, Jesus humbles himself every Mass to become even less than us. Right? In the Eucharist. To become what we eat. I mean, here's the God of the universe showing us how to humble ourselves even more. I mean, if we think about our lives, like we can humble ourselves sometimes and we can be like, oh yeah, I can accept that. All right, I'll not say this or not say that because, we're kind of on a level playing field. But to humble ourselves even lower, to become less for those that we love is a big deal. And Jesus became even less than us. He became what we eat. Right? Now, that sounds backwards. I know that the Eucharist becomes Jesus. I get that. But I'm talking visually, right? I'm not saying Jesus becomes a piece of bread. I got to be careful how I say that because that's not what happens. We know that, right? Jesus doesn't become a piece of bread. A piece of bread becomes Jesus. But my point is if Jesus was worried about outside appearances, if Jesus was worried about what everybody else was going to say, if Jesus was worried about his reputation as a God, I'm not trying to be sacrilegious, but could you imagine if there were other gods, which I'm not saying there are, but just humor me here for a second. All the other gods around, like, he looks like a piece of bread. Look at him, and he calls himself a god, right? I mean, if Jesus was worried about that sort of thing, he would never do that. But didn't Jesus experience that on the cross as a human being? Yes. With the two people, one on each side. Yes. If you are the Son of God, save yourself. Yes. Right? He, as a human being, he experienced that humility. Yes. When we read this whole thing and really think about the idea of who can we really trust? If we think about the messages of what we've been going through in the Gospels and the readings we've been reading, and again, that whole idea of humbling yourself and God exalting us if we humble ourselves, can we trust God to do that? Because we obviously, if we look at all this and we read all these readings, if we read the long version, and we realize we can't trust anybody else. Nope. I mean, look at Peter, right? Look at Peter. You have Peter who followed Jesus. Yes, Lord, you are the Christ. Yeah. Boom, 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 all this stuff. And yet Peter denies him, yeah. Right? And you have, people who don't even know Jesus. I mean, I think about Simon. Think about Simon. Here's this guy, Simon. He's just minding his own business. And all of a sudden, he's forced to carry this cross. Did he know who this guy was? I don't know. We don't really know. But what we do know is Simon's two sons went out and spread the gospel after the crucifixion. And that's true. I don't know. My pastor at my home parish, he knows their names, and they're mentioned in the Acts of the Apostles, I believe. And, there's a story behind them. But the point I'm trying to make is who can we trust? Can we trust the authority? The ones who, can we trust someone like Pilate? Pilate's wife, don't do this. I had a dream about this guy. She sends him the note. Don't do this. I lost a lot of sleep over this righteous man. Does he listen? No. He knew. Pilate knew. When you think about it, right? He wanted to wash his hands of it. Why? Because he knew this was wrong. He knew this was wrong. This is on you. But he still went through with it, didn't he? So can we trust that? Can you trust your closest friends? I mean, think about, obviously, Judas. Could you trust your closest friends? The ones who come up to you and hug you and kiss you on the cheek. Now, I'm not trying to hurt anybody's relationships or feelings, but what I'm talking about trust is complete and total trust. What Jesus is showing us through his example is that really God, he is the only one that will back it up 150,000%. He's the only one that's going to back up completely. Why? Because the rest of us are all broken. We want to do the right thing, but let's face it, selfishness, pride, arrogance, ignorance, all these things get in the way. And we all mess up. As much as we want to be that wonderful friend, that wonderful father, that wonderful mother, that wonderful son, that wonderful daughter, that wonderful whatever, there's always a point where selfishness kicks in. And we tend to mess up. Why else do we need confession? Right? And sometimes we can't even trust ourselves. I don't know about you, but I know that to be true of myself. Where I will wake up and I'm just out of it. You ever have those days, foggy days, your whole mind is just gone, and you're just walking around like, okay. I do this in my own house. I'll get up, and luckily I'm an early riser, so I can spend an hour honestly walking around my house not knowing what I'm doing. And they're not up yet, so it's okay. But I'll do that. I'll go into this room and then I'll go into this room and what am I supposed to be doing? Because a lot of times I can't trust my own mind because I can't figure myself out. But Jesus, through his example, shows us that we can trust him. We can trust him to love us enough to keep humbling himself. And that's a beautiful thing. Again, there's so much in this. I mean, we could be here and really talk about the crucifixion. I had prayed about that. I'm like, man, I don't know. Maybe we should go for that. That's serious business. But we won't do that today because I don't freak anybody out. If you really dive into what crucifixion was and what they did to you, it's just insane. The best way I can think about it is in 7th grade, for the couple years that I was in Catholic school, there was a little nun. Her name was Sister Pauline. And the thing that bugged me about Sister Pauline, she always had candy. And nobody else was allowed to have candy. But her jaw always hurt. So she always had butterscotch candy right here. And she'd hold her hand on against her jaw legs, and all day, this is how she would talk. But I remember the day she took us outside. They had a big thorn bush outside. And she took us out there to show us what the thorns actually look like on the crown of thorns. And I remember that really clearly to think about, wow, that is intense. Now, I wish I had turned to Jesus at that point in my life, but I did not. Okay? But to think about that now, I mean, we're not talking little baby things. We're huge. But to think about how the God of the universe was willing to endure that for us is such an amazing thing.
Can't save them on my own. I can't put out these fires.